symbols of faith have you seen people wear as necklaces? Can you name some of them?
Cross.
Okay. Cross, probably first and foremost. Infinity sign, okay.
Star.
Okay. Star of David, the fish, okay. Anything else? On, okay. Jerusalem cross. St. Christopher medal, okay. All right, so lots of different things. Okay. Have you ever seen a mustard seed necklace? Well, when I was young, and I probably reveal how old I am, it was a fashion statement for many girls who attended church to wear a mustard seed necklace. Did any of you do that? Well, when I first saw one, I thought, what is that small glass globe with a tiny thing in the center? Okay, it's not readily apparent. You have to ask, right? Okay. So it didn't seem to make as much sense to me, though, once they explained it as wearing a cross. And if I were a little older, I might have thought, a mustard seed stands for what? Faith? Might we be venerating faith instead of Jesus? Well, if you think about it, it hardly carries the same kind of weight as a cross does. Might even be a bit boastful. I don't know. I can't quite decide on that one yet. In the Bible that I use the most often, which is the NRSV, the heading for this section reads, Some Sayings of Jesus. And these sayings seem to be kind of loosely strung together, and there's no overarching story or parable. So Jesus' comment comparing faith to the size of the mustard seed follows verses that seem to be focused on living together in Christian community. In the section that comes before today's text, Jesus warns against causing one of these little ones to stumble or sin. Then he directs his followers to rebuke sinners in the community, and if there is repentance, to forgive, even if that person sins 7 times in a day and repents of the sins the same number of times. At that point, which begins our text for today, the apostles say, increase our faith. Maybe they're overwhelmed by the magnitude of what is being asked of them and don't feel either equipped or prepared. Jesus' response to their plea is to say, in effect, a big faith doesn't matter. His response is to say that faith the size of that tiny mustard seed would be sufficient to uproot a mulberry tree and plant it in the sea, that place of chaos where the sea monster Leviathan lives. Or stated another way, even a small amount of faith can make major things happen and bring order out of chaos. But that may not often resonate with us these days. In sympathy with the apostles' request, we might imagine our own faith to be measured something like a cell phone battery icon. And most of the time, our battery looks like it needs charging. The battery is mostly empty instead of full, or we're told that we have 33% of our battery remaining. So, we also tend to quantify our faith. But when do we have enough? Or if we feel particularly drained of faith, we ask ourselves, what happens if I never again have the faith I had a few years ago? Today we have an interesting clash. On the one hand, it's St. Francis Sunday, the day we remember one of God's most faithful and selfless saints, the one for which our church is named. And on the other hand, we have Jesus' disciples asking for more faith, and Jesus replying that if they had even a tiny amount, they could do great things. And that response is followed by Jesus telling a strange parable about slaves doing their duty and not expecting to be recognized for it. Do you thank the slave for doing what was commanded, Jesus asks. So you also, when you've done all that you were ordered to do, say, we are worthless slaves. We've done only what we ought to have done. The slavery language is offensive to our modern ears. and we sympathize with people whose lives are impacted by the institution of slavery in America, even 150 years after its official end. We're also shocked to imagine ourselves as the slaves and God as the owner who gives us orders without even a kind word. The whole thing seems alien, like a heavy-duty dose of God's cold shoulder. Where is the hope, the promise, the love in this text? Andrew Gregory, in the New Proclamation Commentary on the Gospels, comments about slaves and disciples in this text. He says, "Neither may demand any reward or special recognition for doing only what is required of them. This austere warning needs to be heard in comparison to the wider context of Luke's teaching about God as generous, merciful, and compassionate, giving more than God's children ask for, and rushing out to meet us when we come home. This is how God treats us because of who God is. But we should not presume upon God's goodness, nor should we expect it as our due." If there's anyone who served God without desire for reward or compensation, it would be St. Francis. He expected nothing as his due, and as a result, came to know deep and long-lasting gratitude and joy. Ecstasy in the midst of action is a word that we associate with St. Francis. The word ecstasy is from a Greek word that means to stand outside of yourself. Barbara Brown Taylor speaks of St. Francis in this way. Francis of Assisi loved singing hymns with his brothers and sisters, who included not only Brother Bernard and Sister Clare, but also Brother Sun and Sister Moon. Francis could not have told you the difference between the sacred and the secular if he had twisted his arm behind his back. He read the world as reverently as he read the Bible. For him, a leper was as kissable as a bishop's ring, a single bird as much a messenger of God as a cloud full of angels. Francis had no discretion. He did not know where to draw the line between the church and the world. For this reason, among others, Francis is remembered as a saint. How might we find the faith, the ecstasy, the lack of expectation of someone like Francis, you might ask? How might we get to where we also might be able to say, I've done only what I ought to have done? One way to approach that lack of self-consciousness, that faith that trusts in God without being aware of possessing faith, is to take a leaf from our Jewish friends. As Gordon Lathrop suggests in his book, Holy Ground, A Liturgical Cosmology, the days of the observant Jew may be marked with countless blessings, primarily in the prayers that frame a formal meal. The prayers said when those at table begin to eat the holy food. Yet this model is echoed in other forms to be used throughout the day, on waking, on washing hands, on smelling something fragrant, on hearing thunder, on seeing beautiful trees or animals, and on and on. Here is a blessing on seeing beautiful trees or animals. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has such as these in your world. That is all. A prayer like that greets the beautiful creature and rejoices in its beauty, acknowledging God as the source of the goodness. Here, the only use of the creature is the sight itself. The encountered tree or animal is God's. For God's delight, a delight we are permitted to glimpse, while letting the creature still be free and quite other than we are. Let's remember for a moment the animal blessing that we just experienced. Remember each of the animals. Imagine blessing God through those words. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has such as these in your world. Feels pretty great, doesn't it? Well, for a minute, let's create a few petitions together of our own. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who what?
Who has the oceans in the world.
Okay. Okay, who has the oceans in the world. Okay, who has the sun and the moon. Okay. Babies. Okay, who has babies in the world.
Who forgives.
Okay. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who forgives.
Who created all the critters.
Created all critters. What is that? Who lets us play in his sandbox. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Who made the trees and flowers. Okay.
Who loves us unconditionally.
Who loves us unconditionally. Yes. What did you say?
Songs and dances.
Ah, yes. Okay. Who created songs and dances. Okay.
Who gave us artists and physicians.
Who gave us artists and physicians.
Flowers.
And flowers. Okay, we could write our own hymn, couldn't we? I think we should. Okay. So here are a few others that I added also as I was thinking. Okay. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who gives us other humans to love. You know, we can look around and see each other. Okay. Or who challenges us to remember that the world doesn't revolve around us. How's that? That would be something like doing only what we ought to have done, right? Okay. Or who reminds us that there is great variety of opinion in your world.
Oh, yeah.
That's especially good in this season, isn't it? Okay, all right. Well, quantifying our mustard seed faith is finally not the point. We are fickle creatures, and at times we will feel bursting with faith. At other times, we look anxiously at the low faith battery icon and wonder how we can become charged again. But here's a secret. If we can say several times a day, blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who, we may remember that it's about ecstasy, standing outside of ourselves. It's not about how much faith we have, even for difficult tasks like forgiveness. It's about the one in whom our faith resides, who has such as these in your world. We ask God to help us notice and to fill our hearts with grace as we have been loved and forgiven, that our faith might be strengthened and that we might be vehicles, like Francis, of God's attentive love to us.